Today I am going to be talking about my epic fantasy novel Shadow Dragon. Here is the giant 600-page paperback, the longest thing I have ever written. And today I'm going to tell you all about the story, about the world, about the series as a whole, and a little about how I came to write this book. If you're new to the channel, hello, my name is Amy. I'm an indie author with 15 published books, and the most recent was, of course, Shadow Dragon. This is the first book in an epic fantasy series. To give you the very quick overview, it obviously features dragons very heavily. We also have dragon riders and the school that trains them. We have elemental magic and we have a fight against dark magic, which is what the dragon riders exist to combat. Let me read you the tagline on the back of the book. A reluctant rider, a dragon egg given up for dead, a bond that could end an entire age. I think that really goes to the core of Shadow Dragon, so it's a great place to start. And in terms of genre, this is classic high or epic fantasy. We have a war, we have magic, we have a big cast of characters. There is in this book no romance. I know dragons are huge in romantasy right now, but this is definitely more of the classic fantasy vein. So let's talk more about the story itself. Our story begins with our protagonist, Nika. She is a farmer's daughter. She has grown up in a bit of a dusty backwater town, never really expecting her life to go anywhere. Her family have been in this town for a long time. As far as she is concerned, there isn't really much of an escape. Except one member of her family has left the town, her beloved aunt Gora. Now, Gora took part in Dragonspire's trials, which meant she won a place to serve in Dragonspire, to ride a dragon of her own, and to serve the world by fighting dark magic. But only 2 years after arriving in the Spire, she stopped sending letters home, which leaves Nika back in her hometown having absolutely no idea what has happened to her aunt. She decides that the only way she is going to get answers for her family is to try to get to Dragonspire herself. And she's in luck. The Dragonspire trials are coming to her town, which is quite a rarity given that it is a bit of a backwater. Nika is so determined to get through the trials successfully though that she makes an unfortunate decision to lie about her identity, thinking that only noble sons and daughters will ever be chosen as dragon riders. And Nika does in fact prove herself in the trials. She's offered a place in the Spire, only for her lie to be uncovered at the last moment and for her plan to all come crashing down. She is offered a place in the Spire, but not as a trainee rider. Instead, she is told she will have to serve in the hatchery, raising the Spire's dragon eggs. Now really, this is a fate that Nika is willing to accept. All she wants to do in the Spire is find her aunt. She never wanted to be a rider, she still doesn't. So she heads to Dragonspire, she starts work in the hatchery, and she searches whenever she can for news of her missing Aunt Gora. Of course though, there is always more to a good dragon story than that. Nika is the only one on duty in the hatchery when a thief breaks in and tries to steal a black egg. Nika, who is sworn to protect these eggs, gives chase without even thinking about it. She manages to catch up with the thief and retrieve the egg. And though the thief gets away, she is now in possession of an egg which she has saved. When she takes the egg to the master of the hatchery though, she is told that it isn't going to survive. She is ordered to take the egg away and leave it to die, which is something she simply can't do. She instead makes the fateful decision to keep the egg and to try to raise the dragonling in secret. And really, this is where Nika's troubles only begin. She does indeed find herself raising and training a dragonling, but in the process she must adjust to a very different role within the Spire. And all the while she is still searching for answers about her aunt. During the search, she finds herself drawn into a wider conspiracy that is afflicting the Spire as a whole, and she comes up against betrayal within the ranks of the Spire and ultimately a plot to bring the entire mountain of dragon riders to its knees. So there is my little summary of this first book. To understand a little bit more about Dragonspire itself, this mountain where riders and dragons are trained, we have to talk more about the world building as a whole. Dragonspire sits in the centre of an island called Chalice, which is on the world of Aeterna, or the Eternal World. The series takes place in the second age of Aeterna's history, and in fact this is a world in which I have set multiple series. For context, the one series I've published so far, which is nearly complete, is Moonruin Saga, which is a tale of a monster hunter and a druid. That takes place in the third age of Aeterna's history. And I have stories planned across all 5 ages of this world, which vary in tone and scope, and of course technology level. The second age in which this book and series take place is an era that has been beset by void magic, an alien power which has arrived on Aeterna and really threatens to chew everything in existence to dust and ash. The only magic that can push it back is the elemental power of the dragons, who have themselves originated in other elemental realms, of which there are 8. Through a pact formed between the first riders and dragons early in the second age, void magic is kept at bay and the rest of the world is kept safe. As an additional point, as I said, neither void magic nor elemental magic are native to the world of Aeterna. They both originate elsewhere. The magic that belongs to this world is called source magic. Now, at the time of the second age, it is used very much like a natural resource to be gathered, harvested, and turned into industrial goods. Dragonspire actually sits on the central well of source magic, and they make the most of this. They have been able to sustain themselves financially for so long because they take full control of the harvesting and selling of source magic, which can then be sent off around the world and used in the construction of anything from airships to weapons. Now, this magitech element of Shadow Dragon and the Dread Queen's War really speaks to one of the earliest inspirations that I had for this series, and that is Final Fantasy. Specifically Final Fantasy XII, which is one of my favourites in the series, but there are also elements of Final Fantasies X and XIII, which I drew inspiration from. In some of the themes that will develop across the series, I think we could look at X for that, and in the vibrancy and colour of the world, I was very drawn to Final Fantasy XIII. But of course, the other big influence that went into the writing of Shadow Dragon was dragons themselves. By the time I came to write this book, I had already published 14 books, been writing for many years, but I had never written about dragons, which really feel like one of the staples of the fantasy genre to me. I had covered airships, monster hunters, assassins, princesses, and I kept looking around and thinking, why haven't I written dragons yet? I need to change that. So I did. The very earliest version of Shadow Dragon was set in a self-contained world. But whilst I was working on the planning and outlining for the story, I was also working on many other fantasy settings, which slowly and surely began to draw together. The result was Aeterna, and now, to be honest, most of the fantasy projects I have in progress belong to this world, and many of them are interconnected, some in subtler ways than others. The central concept of the Dragon Riders fighting against void magic and ultimately the Dread Queen was really there very early on, as was the idea of a world where magic and technology were combined, where hope and adventure and friendship were central to the plot despite the darkness of some of the events taking place, and where bonds between dragons, riders, and groups of dragons and riders would be key to the plot. But this was still a story that was years in the planning. My earliest digital notes go back to 2020, but it had been floating around in my head for much longer than that. I would honestly struggle to put a date on it. I made several attempts over several years to start writing Shadow Dragon, but none of them quite clicked, and I really never got past the first 2 or 3 chapters. It wasn't until I added in the extra strand of Gora and her disappearance that Nika's story really came to life in my head. I'd always worked on the assumption that she wanted to be a dragon rider, and that was why she joined the Spire, but once I switched things around, the story came together very quickly. When I look back at my notes from 2020, the plot I have now is really quite similar to that first outline I made. I drafted much of the book during 2024. I started my edits later that year, wrapped them up in the first half of 2025 and published in May. It is to date the longest book I have ever written, and it is the start of what may well be the longest series I ever write. I have others in the planning stages, but the Dread Queen's War is really up there in terms of complexity, scope, timescale and number of characters. Which leads me nicely into talking about the series itself. As it is called The Dread Queen's War, I think it's fairly obvious that a war will form a key part of the plot. Dragons too will be central to every single book in the series. Nika and her shadow dragon are key players, and they really draw all the events of the entire series together. As I film this video, I am already deep into drafting book 2, which is already shaping up to be a little bit longer than Shadow Dragon. This one will feature both Nika as a point of view and a second character, and the same will be true for every other volume in the series. There will be, if all goes to plan, 9 books. Having said that, I do know that the plot and events will probably spiral out the further I get into the series, so I am prepared to write more than 9 if I need to. And the big question, do I know how the series ends? Yes, I definitely do. There are actually hints to the ending of the Dread Queen's War in Moonruin Saga, where the Second Age is ancient history to the characters there. There are about 1700 years separating the Dread Queen's War and Moonruin Saga. However, before you run out and read that looking for spoilers, I would caution that 1700 years is a long time. So I would take what the characters in Moonruin Saga know about the Second Age with a grain of salt. So from here I will be writing the rest of the second book in the series throughout the end of 2025, and I'm looking at a release date in spring of 2026. Until then, Shadow Dragon is available on Amazon as an ebook and in KU. It is also available as a paperback in a wide range of retailers, and links to those places will be down in the description. I hope I have piqued your interest about the story today. Writing Shadow Dragon really has been the most fulfilling process of my author career so far. I'm really excited to continue with the series, to see where it takes me, and though I have a lot of the series planned already, I know there will be many more surprises along the way. So thank you for watching. Remember to check out the links below if you are interested in picking up a copy of the book. Please feel free to leave me any questions in the comments below, and I will see you next time.